I think culture policy might be pretty important for building trust in Slovakia, building a sense of community, building a sense of a shared identity and shared history.
So welcome back to the Open Muse podcast. This is episode 2 in our series of different conversations about different aspects of the project. Super huge project, but basically a lot of numbers and a lot of data, but we're really talking about culture and culture policy and how we can maybe provide some data to affect that policy. So the ideal person to talk to about that is going to be Marcel, and I'll leave it to him to introduce himself. Hi, Marcel.
Hi, Mark. So my name is Marcel Čas, which means time in Slovak, just for the laughs. And I'm the former head of the Institute for Culture Policy, the analytical unit at the Ministry of Culture of the Slovak Republic. I'm the former head because the analytical unit was dissolved some time ago, like half a year ago. But yeah, I'm very open to talk about public policy, culture policy, and data with you.
Excellent. Okay. I'm also more from the culture side than the data side, so I should understand the answers more than some of the other episodes, which are very technical. But let's talk about culture first of all. And you're in Slovakia, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
So, what's then the special thing about Slovakia?
What's the
Why are we talking to a Slovak about this?
I think you are talking to a Slovak about this is because we actually were one of the not many countries actually had an analytical unit that's actually doing database analysis about culture policy. Just because I think the set of people that actually enjoy numbers and actually enjoy a lot of culture is not very strong. Like, for example, in other fields of public policy, for example, health economics and health public policy, you have a lot of data nerds that are actually studying the topic in a quantitative manner, and then they can actually provide data-based analyses and arguments for the different policymakers in the health space. But in the space of culture, it doesn't really have such a long tradition, even worldwide. Like, for example, the gold standard for us public policy analysts in the world is basically OECD, which provides a lot of data-based and arguments-based analysis for different types of public policy. And like the output of culture policy analysis that OECD actually produces is a lot less than other areas of public life. So it's basically a subject that's not so well developed than other subjects, and I think that with the workings of the Institute for Culture Policy in Slovakia, we were like one of the premier analytical units that we were actually pioneering some of those concepts and some of those indicators for culture policy, basically just applying rules of analysis and economic analysis to the subject matter of culture and culture policy.
And is there anything you think made it happen in Slovakia and not other places? Is it just the right people, the right place, or was there other factors involved?
The biggest factor, I think, was that Slovakia as a nation had a lot of feedback from the European Commission, from the OECD, and from other international organizations like that in the past we were doing public policy and decisions about public policy really based on nothing, not on robust analyses, but basically on hearsay or some gut feelings and so on. And it came to a point where the European Union actually funded a big project. And the project was the goal of the project basically was to create and fund an analytical unit on each line ministry of the Slovak Republic. So during the time of the project, each ministry got an analytical unit. Doesn't matter which ministry it was. Well, some of those ministries actually had an analytical unit before the project funded by the European Union, but the Institute for Culture Policy actually got started, paid for by funds from the European Union, which is basically Germany, so thank you guys.
You said the situation got really bad, so that then you had to fix it. Do you think culture was included just because it's one of the ministries? Do you think or was there like actually a really strong desire to get evidence-based thinking going in culture?
I think so. There has been a movement in the culture space where basically the stakeholders in culture slowly but surely understood that when you need to lobby for public funds, that you need some sound analytics behind the lobbying to be able to actually efficiently argue for your case. So there was also this aspect or this factor that actually made it possible for the Institute for Culture Policy to start up in the first place.
So were you getting your recommendations listened to, implemented, or was it mostly just analyzing and providing the information?
It was mostly analyzing and providing information, but some of our advisory points and tools for policy were actually implemented. But yeah, not all of them, which is absolutely correct. Like in a democratic society, technocrats shouldn't be able to run the country. We technocrats, or I was formerly a technocrat, should be able just to provide the best evidence possible that's available to us, to the policymakers that actually do have democratic legitimacy. And it is up to them to make the actual decisions. So that's completely fine. That's not all of our recommendations were actually being put into place. Although I personally, of course, would want for more of those recommendations to be actually realized, but that's completely normal.
Do you think the decision makers were welcoming this extra information, or was there some pushback?
I think some of them they were, but I don't. Maybe the right way to answer this is that it doesn't matter who the policymaker is. It's more important what the topic is and what do actually the data say. Like in some cases, you provide data that says that, well, you should go left, but the minister wants to go right, and he's actually looking just for numbers to prove his point. But if the numbers objectively don't say that we can provide such numbers. We never lied or cherry picked the data. So basically, if the data says what is the preconceived notion of the ministry that gets the data, then it's welcomed, obviously. But if it says the opposite, or if it isn't clear, then maybe the reception isn't as good. But yeah, that's pretty normal, I think, in the analytics space.
Yeah, I've had myself in Vilnius in local government pushback on even finding out the data, because I think at the moment the system is that a lot of people have power to make subjective decisions, and if you start counting things and providing evidence for going left, then all of the people that are trying to go right suddenly don't even want to know.
Yeah, it's basically. I mean, let's talk about culture. It's about the setting up a culture where evidence-based decision making is required by the policymaker, and is expected by the policymaker, and is also expected by the voters. And such a culture isn't really set up in Slovakia at the moment. I mean, it's building, and I think we moved some place during the last 20-30 years for sure in Slovakia. But yeah, it's still possible to make policies based on feelings.
Do you think, you can go too far if you start counting all of the numbers and rejecting feelings. So is there maybe some other more qualitative stuff that you've been researching rather than just purely numbers?
I mean, we were dealing most of the time with numbers, but frequently when we actually had an analysis put onto paper, then we would frequently discuss the paper and the results of the paper with the actual people that are implementing the part of culture policy that was actually analyzed in the paper. So we got a lot of good and quality feedback on the paper, and we were also obviously capable to better the results of the papers. So it's not that we were doing the analysis based solely on the numbers and just looking at our whiteboard in our offices. We were also discussing the findings with the stakeholders in the culture space in Slovakia. And yeah, sometimes we agreed, sometimes we disagreed, but the discussions really were being had.
So I'm seeing that there's a strategy being developed for 2030. Is this already a published strategy under implementation, or are you still preparing it?
The strategy was being written in the years 2022 up until 2023, and the government actually passed the strategy in 2023. So it's illegal, but there's a big but. The government that actually signed the strategy was a different government that we have today. Well, in Slovakia, there's also this tradition where you basically don't have any continuity between different elected governments. Basically, everybody thinks that when he has the power, he will change the country drastically. So the country, and this is during the last 30 years, it's basically shifting in between extremes all the time. Which makes it hard for something to stick, and there really is this culture of discontinuity. So the new politicians every time don't feel obliged to follow actually in the footsteps of the old politicians. So the strategy is in force formally, but it isn't really being implemented or monitored or anything like that. That's one thing. Which is a big but about the strategy. And the second but about the strategy is, and this was for me apparent at the time of making the strategy, there was no fiscal space for the strategy, meaning that there was no additional funds being pinned down to the strategy, and which sometimes is normal, but you have to make a decision. Either you have more resources, more financial resources when the time of writing the strategy, and you can find tools that are efficient and that actually cost you some money, and then you can implement later because it's backed by some finances. But if you don't have the finances in the state budget, which happens, then you have to find policy tools that are budgetary neutral. And one of the biggest mistake of the strategy that you mentioned in my mind was that the strategy had a lot of policy tools that were actually required to have some financial backing, but the strategy as a whole didn't have any additional funds in the state budget. So it was basically, it was written to fail, basically. I mean, myself and several other people who actually know how the state works knew that it would fail because of those two reasons, because it was just it didn't have the political backing and it didn't have the financial backing that it needed to be able to actually reshape the culture policy landscape in Slovakia.
Do you think it moved the discussion a bit, and it's just one of those steps, and next time good luck comes around, it'll be built on and improved?
I mean, this cannot go on forever. Really, for the listeners who may not know, the thing about discontinuity in Slovakia is really a big and major issue. Like, each government completely shifts, from the extreme left to the extreme right to the extreme left again to the extreme right again, and it's just it's just not an environment where you can build lasting things on the state level. But yes, I mean, it's just the process of learning, I guess. Like, we in Slovakia, just to have a little history lesson, we don't really have a big tradition and history in running our own republic. We were for hundreds and hundreds of years, we as a nation were being run by other people, either the Hungarians or the Austrians or the Czechs and so on. And this is, on a historical scale, this really is for us a big learning experience. And yeah, we are falling all the time.
Okay, well, if you had the government behind you and the wind behind you and some good luck, what do you think are the things you'd start tackling in Slovakia now?
Regarding culture policy, I mean, if I had the government's backing, one of the biggest weaknesses in Slovak's culture policy is that we are one of the worst countries in the EU when it comes to getting private funds into the public culture institutions, or even in the private public institutions. We are basically one of the worst countries in this. Again, it comes to history and tradition. There just isn't a tradition of entrepreneurs wanting to prove to the society that they actually wanna invest in culture and invest in their standing in the society. So this is one of the biggest hurdles I think culture policy faces. Then the other thing is that Slovakia actually does have a pretty deep history of culture and of the development of Slovak culture. That is the case, but we ourselves a lot of the times aren't even aware of the fact. So I think one of the biggest hurdles is for the Slovak public and also for the world's public at large to promote Slovakia's culture much more. I think there is much to be had. I feel that, for example, the Americans, they are so good at marketing and stuff. I feel that they know how to sell anything, even if the intrinsic value isn't that good. But I feel that in Slovakia, the intrinsic value of culture is really better than most Slovaks even realize. But we just don't know that we have the tradition, because again, we don't have the history of running our own state. So we don't really know how to do it and how to do a bit of self-promotion, which also links to the fact that then the private companies aren't willing to invest in culture. Well, because basically even themselves they don't know how deep Slovak's culture is. So those two are some of the biggest hurdles, I guess. One of the biggest things I have to mention, because I think it's really important, is really high level, and it also pertains not only to culture policy but to all policy in Slovakia, is that in Slovakia there is a really a huge distrust in institutions, but also there's a big distrust in your neighbors, for example, like in indicators where you ask European citizens or citizens of European Union that whether they trust their neighbors. Like Slovakia consistently is one of the last countries, meaning that we don't even trust our neighbors, we don't trust our institutions, we don't trust our government. There's basically a big pile of distrust that's really corrosive to the society. And it's also corrosive to the culture and to culture policy, because to be able to go and enjoy some culture event, some culture meeting, for example, you actually have to trust those people. You actually have to trust the institution that it will be good, and it will be nicely choreographed, and that you will have a nice experience, which is one thing. And also the causality runs also the other way. Is that I think culture policy might be pretty important for building trust in Slovakia, building a sense of community, building a sense of a shared identity and shared history, which again, because of historical reasons, it's not really so strong in Slovakia.
I mean, the map you're talking about of trusting your neighbor, I think Lithuania is also one of the red-colored countries on that map. And it's an Eastern European thing, and we all know who was here and what they did to societies.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, it's the unfortunate cultural, mental, and historical aftermath of the experiment with the centrally planned utopian governments.
I mean, I really love your point about how you have to trust that the performance is going to be good, that the lighting and the sound is going to be good before you pay money for a ticket in advance, or before you walk into the club. I mean, you have to pay at the door, and that means you have to trust it's going to be good inside. And that's an excellent point, because I've seen the same effect in Lithuania when I came here 20 years ago from London. One of the hugest differences was that lack of trust. And the first party I did, someone even didn't believe that the DJs I'd invited were going to come, and he threatened to kill me if the DJs didn't really come.
Oh my God.
It's like the first time I'd ever heard of the concept that there could be a party where someone lied about the lineup and cheated the audience. But apparently that was going on a lot. And
well, welcome to Eastern Europe, yeah.
Yeah, like you were mentioning about, there's problems that you have to solve that you need the government behind you. And you need to pick up the data, which is something we'll be talking in another of the episodes. And I think even we've been doing other projects in Open Muse about fairness. As you're in, I hate to use the term, but a smaller country like I am, is there a bit more you could tell us about what you were trying to do in your research to provide evidence of the benefits of local culture or the benefits of that live music kind of things?
Maybe one thing that could be important to an international or European Union audience is that, I know that you guys primarily in your project focus on music policy or policy of the music industry, but to be quite honest, the Ministry of Culture in Slovakia wasn't really too focused on the music industry, and that's because like as a governmental body you cannot do anything. You can do only that which is based on some laws. Like it is forbidden for you to execute anything that's not written down in the law that you are able to do it. And in the Slovak Republic, but it's also the case in a lot of European Union countries, which is also apparent during the COVID pandemic, is that some of those creative industries, which the music industry is part of, it's not really clear in the legislature which ministries are actually responsible for driving and doing policy regarding the music industry. Because one could really plausibly argue that the music industry is an industry, and therefore it's in the ballpark of the Ministry of Industry, for example, in Slovakia, to be able to run music industry. And also there are some actual policy tools that are being provided by the Ministry of Industry in Slovakia. But the overlap of the different people living and working in culture is such that they basically think that it's obvious that music and the music industry should be part of the responsibilities of the Ministry of Culture. But if you actually look at the laws, it doesn't really say that. It's really quite murky. And this is pretty bad, but it's really a lot pretty similar in a lot of other European countries. So during the COVID-19 pandemic, it wasn't really sure which ministry should provide funding to which groups of the culture and creative sectors. So in Slovakia and also in other places, you had some culture employees being like financed during the pandemic, like the special finances by the Ministry of Culture. Like, for example, when we were talking about employment in theaters or in museums or in libraries and so on. So help provided came from the Ministry of Culture because that's the ministry that's actually responsible for those policies. But help for actual companies, for-profit companies, was being delivered by the Ministry of Industry. And also help to artists that are not employed, but they're just working as freelancers. That help was being provided by the Ministry of Social Affairs. So we had basically in Slovakia 3 ministries that were administrating relief funds to the culture and creative space, which again was a big problem in the whole of European Union as well. And to this day, this problem really wasn't resolved. So, but this is a long-winded answer just to tell you that when we are talking specifically about music industry, we in the Institute for Culture Policy didn't have a lot of time invested in researching the music industry as such. I mean, we did try to research it some, just because it makes sense, like on a social science basis. And just so you get the picture, we had 19 different culture policies, and each policy had dedicated some number of database indicators on the performance of the policy. So we basically had a set of, I don't know, tens, maybe hundreds of indicators for each dedicated part of culture. But yeah, as we were providing public policy advice in the ministry to the ministers, most of the time we were providing advice on those parts of culture policy that were actually being run by the Ministry of Culture. So that means monuments, theaters, libraries, museums, and so on. So I don't want to disappoint you too much, but the time spent.
That's actually a great answer, because it is a problem that the music industry in the culture ministry means it's this tiny speck surrounded by all of these things that are considered far more serious and far more worthy of money, and heritage buildings, and it's quite hard to compete against that kind of thing when you're talking to people that really love heritage buildings and have no connection to the music industry at all. And also, if you try and go to the economy ministry, they'll tell you it's culture, so go to the culture ministry.
Yeah, exactly.
Also, in COVID, I had the economy minister told me that sector, normally a bar only lasts about 5 years anyway, so we're not going to give them any money because we know they're all going to close.
Oh, okay.
And I managed to present her very quickly some data that made her rethink her policy, because I was defending clubs that had all been open longer than 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, that's completely wrong. Like he needed some analytics to back up that claim.
It's what you think if you never checked, right? I guess that's just.
I mean, the music industry is quite volatile, but it doesn't mean that it cannot be researched or argued for. But
she saw it maybe more as why give a subsidy to these people, because she didn't see it as an investment, like she would see in a normal business that was any other business that was failing at the time. She was definitely giving money to.
Yeah, but which is again wrong, because the music industry actually makes money, so it's an industry really.
That's something I hope that there's going to be some numbers in Open Muse, because I have also tried to argue for some zero cost policies, and I even said at one point, why are we putting a limit on this thing? Because every time we put money into one of these venues, we're getting more money back. So why would we limit? Why would we say with maximum 10 venues? Like, we don't want this to be too profitable. So either you agree that it's making money and therefore it's an investment, or you call it a subsidy?
Well, there I have to defend the policymakers a little bit, because those same types of arguments about the multiplication effect of the investment in some part of creative industries, let's say, the same argument can be made and is being made by other industries as well. So if you are in a space where you have limited resources, I'm an economist by trade, I'm sorry. So if you have limited resources, you actually do have to prioritize, and you actually cannot really invest into everything as much as you would want, because the same logic of multiplication of the investments in music industry could someone use in the audiovisual industry or in the design industry or marketing and so on and so on. So yeah, I mean, it will always be a fight about scarce resources.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is that they know that those other industries have multipliers. But there's still some areas of creativity which they assume are loss-making, let alone having a multiplier. That's the traditional idea of this poor artist who you have to give €500 a month so he doesn't starve to death. That's I found that opinion among far too many decision makers, let's say.
Yeah. It's actually. I will not say that it's right or wrong. It's much more complicated than that, because like in those 19 odd something cultural sectors that we actually in the institute had for analysis. In each sector, the situation is a little bit different. In each sector, you have another mix of public and private funds. In each sector, you have another profitability margins, and so on and so on. So it's basically not something that can be answered in a one simple way for the culture and creative industry sector as a whole. It needs to be analyzed really. Each part of culture and creative industry as such.
Well, I mean, I think that's a great place to end because I've just checked the clock and I've realised I've been enjoying this discussion and learning a bit too much. So I missed the fact that we need to wrap this up. So take the compliment, Marcel. Thank you very much for being so interesting. Thank you for coming.
That's really sweet of you. Thank you very much for having me.
For the listeners, come back soon for another episode of the Open Muse podcast.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.